There's a $30 knife in my pocket right now, and I own knives that cost 10 times as much. I reach for the cheap one anyway. So do most of the people I know who take knives seriously. And that's the part nobody selling you a $200 folder wants to say out loud. Here's what the hobby doesn't put on a billboard. The cheap end of the knife world quietly caught up. Good steel, locks that actually lock, fit and finish that used to cost a week's pay. A flood of good, cheap Chinese knives dragged the whole market back down to earth. 10 years ago, a hard steel and a solid lock meant $100. Now it means $30, and the old names had to answer for it. So I pulled 8 knives you can buy today for the price of a decent dinner. And every one of them punches so far above its price tag it's almost embarrassing for the brands charging triple for the same job. One quick thing before we start, since carry laws are all over the map. Blade length limits and rules on one hand and assisted openers change city to city, so check yours before you clip any of these in a pocket. We're counting up to the one I think is the single best value in the whole category. It's a knife that comes off the exact same factory floor as a blade selling for $400, and I'll show you the proof when we get there. Number 8. The Opinel No. 08. It's a wooden-handled French folder that's barely changed since the 1890s, and it sits in the permanent design collection at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. An actual art museum decided this thing is one of the best designed objects on Earth, and it costs about $20. There's no pocket clip and no thumb stud. What it has is a little twisting collar called the viroblock that locks the blade open, and locks it closed too, which is more than a lot of tactical knives can say. You can get it in high carbon or in a Sandvik stainless, and either one takes an edge that'll genuinely startle you. The carbon version even browns over with a patina the more you cut with it, which sounds like a flaw and is actually the thing people chase. Set it next to a $100 tactical folder with a thick blade and an aggressive grind, and the little French knife outslices it all day. Because the Opinel blade is thin and the grind is high, and it just parts material like it owes it money. It's cheap because Opinel has stamped these out by the millions for over a century, and still sells it as what it always was, a working man's knife. No ad budget, no clip, no gimmick to pad the price. I keep one in a jacket, and every time I hand it to somebody to open a box, they're surprised it's the cheapest knife I own, instead of the most expensive. The trade-offs are real, so know them going in. No clip, no one-hand opening, and if you let the wood sit wet, it swells. The number 08 is the mid-size one most people want. There's a smaller number 06 if it lives in a dress pocket. Either way, it's a slicer and a gentleman's utility knife, not a pry bar. Buy it knowing that, and you'll never regret $20 again. Number 7. The Ka-Bar Dozier, street priced around $30 in the plain stainless version, sometimes less. Ka-Bar built its whole name on fixed blades, the big military knives your grandfather knew, and the Dozier folder is almost an afterthought in the lineup. The price gets funny once you learn where the design came from. It's named for Bob Dozier, a custom knife maker they called Dr. D2, because he built his whole reputation grinding that tool steel by hand. His custom folders run several $100s and carry a waiting list. This is his design, adapted for a factory, and you can have it for the price of 2 movie tickets. 3-inch drop point, a workaday stainless called Oz 8, a solid lockback, a reversible clip, a thumb stud you can flick either-handed. It even comes in blaze orange so you stop losing it in the truck, which is exactly where mine lives, because it's the knife I grab when I've got nicer options at home and just need something I won't cry over. Want the comparison that stings? Spyderco's own budget workhorse, the Tenacious, is the knife everybody used to recommend, and it's a good knife. But it's crept up toward $45–50 now, and plenty of longtime carriers will tell you flat that the Dozier does the same job for $20 less. The steel isn't fancy. It sharpens in 2 minutes and holds a working edge, and for the money that's the whole assignment. I've carried one hard for over a year, and stopped checking whether it's in my pocket, which is the highest compliment I give a knife. Number 6 is where the steel talk gets serious. The Ontario Rat 1 is the knife that taught a whole generation what D2 feels like without paying $100 for it. D2 is a harder, semi-stainless tool steel, an old industrial die steel that holds an edge far longer than the soft budget stuff. For years, it only showed up on knives well over $100. The Rat 1 put it on a $35 folder with a nylon handle, a dead simple liner lock, and a 4-way clip. And the ergonomics are so good that people with expensive collections still keep one in the rotation. The name, by the way, is short for Randall's Adventure and Training, the outfit that designed it. Now watch how the pricing game actually works. The Ontario Rat and the ESEE Zancudo get sold as 2 separate brands, with 2 separate camps of fans arguing online over which one is better. And the same designer is behind both, Jeff Randall drew the rat for Ontario, then split off and put out the near-identical Zancudo under his own ESEE's label. And both of them come off the same benches in the same Taiwan shop, a place called Proceeding Manufacture, with different logos pressed into the handle and a few dollars of difference for the badge. Same knife, 2 labels. There's a real catch with D2, and it's worth knowing before you buy. It's only semi-stainless, so it'll surface rust if you neglect it. A knife shop owner I trade with took a customer's D2 rat apart and found the liner spotting with rust under the scales after one sweaty summer. Wipe it down, put a drop of oil on it now and then, and it's fine. Ignore it and D2 reminds you it's a tool steel. That's the trade for the edge, and at $35 it's a trade worth making. If you'd rather not think about it, the rat also comes in a rust-proof Sandvik stainless for the same money. Number 5. Pick up a QSP Penguin and the first thing you notice is that it doesn't feel like a cheap knife at all. QSP is one of those Chinese value brands that showed up out of nowhere and started embarrassing the establishment. The Penguin runs D2 with real micarta handle scales and a simple liner lock for around $32. Micarta, if you haven't held it, is a grippy layered material that soaks up a little sweat and feels great in the hand. The kind of thing you normally pay up for. The fit and finish is the headline. The reviewer at Knife Center, a guy who's physically handled thousands of knives, put every $25 knife on his table and said flat that nothing was assembled as cleanly as the QSP. Nothing. So you're getting the blade steel of a solid working knife and the finish of a $60 or $80 gentleman's folder for a hair over 30. A line cook I know carries one for exactly that reason. It's nice enough that he doesn't feel like he's holding a toy, and cheap enough that when it walks off in a busy kitchen, which everything eventually does, he's out $30 instead of $200. The reason it costs so little is almost dumb. Nobody outside the hobby has heard the name, and that lack of recognition is the entire discount. The Penguin's cousin, the Parrot, even ran an older version in a tougher steel called 440C at under $20, and some folks still hunt those down. Want the same slim, quiet feel in a stainless that shrugs off rust completely? The Ruka P801 is right there in the same money, and it's the knife half the internet names first when somebody asks for a cheap winner. By the way, if you're the type who'd rather carry a smart $40 knife than a status $200 one, this channel is built for you. Subscribe and I'll keep pulling the brand tax apart, one category a week. The next 3 are the heavy hitters. Number 4, the CJRB Pyrite, is the one where I have to argue with the marketing, and that's exactly why I trust it. CJRB is the budget line of a company called Artisan Cutlery. And the Pyrite is a button lock folder with a fidget-friendly action, G10 or aluminum scales, and they're in-house steel for around $30. On the table, it feels like a $70 knife. That button lock matters more than it sounds. The mechanism where you thumb a button and the blade drops shut one-handed is the kind of thing Benchmade puts on knives north of $150. Now it's on a $30 folder and it's genuinely fun to run. If a button lock isn't your thing, CJRB makes a near twin called the Acacia with a crossbar lock instead. Same steel, same money, so you can pick your mechanism and pay the same $30 either way. So let me be straight about the steel, because the box isn't. CJRB markets it as a powder metallurgy steel, which is the language premium super steels use. A metallurgist named Laren Thomas, who runs the most respected knife steel testing out there, took a hard look and found it's actually a spray-formed steel in the same family as the ordinary 9 series stainless, not a true powder super steel. Does that make it bad? Not even a little. It's fine-grained and it performs great for the money. But it isn't the wonder steel the label implies. And a knife friend tells you that instead of reading you the marketing, Artisan sells the Pyrite as their affordable line and ships it straight to you, no importer stacking a markup on top. So what you're paying for is the steel and the lock, not an advertising campaign. Great knife, just buy it for what it actually is. Number 3, Kizer Vanguard, and this one's a straight-up magic trick. Kizer is a Chinese company that spent the last decade proving made in China doesn't mean junk. They build titanium-framed knives with high-end steel that sell for $200, $300, $400, and serious knife people respect them for it. The Vanguard line is that same company's budget tier, out of the same factory, held to the same build standard, with a premium stainless and G10 handles, usually somewhere in the $40 to $50 range depending on the model. A machinist I know put it better than I can. He handles one of Kizer's titanium flagships, something north of $200 with a super steel. Then he handles a $40 Vanguard, and he says the machining, the centering, the way the lock snaps in, all of it feels like it came off the same equipment. because it did. What you're actually buying is the fit and finish reputation Kizer earned on its expensive titanium knives in a folder that costs a tenth of the flagship, because they left off the titanium and the exotic steel and kept the part that matters, which is how tightly the thing goes together. And nobody says the quiet part out loud. The word China on the label still scares a chunk of buyers off, and that fear is baked right into the low price, even though it's the same company those same buyers would trust without blinking at $400. The exact steel depends on the model, so check the one you're eyeing. But the answer's almost always the same. It's more knife than the price should allow. Number 2 is for the person who hears all this and says, "Fine, but I want it made in America." The Buck 110 has been made in the United States since 1964 and still sells for around $40. Brass bolsters, a wood handle, a lockback, and a stainless called 420HC that Buck heat treats better than almost anyone in the business. That heat treat isn't a throwaway line either. Buck's process was dialed in decades ago by a man named Paul Boss, probably the most famous heat treater alive, and it reportedly squeezes something like 50% more cutting out of the same cheap steel than anyone else gets from it. That's the whole trick behind a $40 blade that outperforms its own spec sheet. And it carries the Buck Forever warranty, lifetime. Your grandkid could send this exact knife in for service. And this is the knife that basically invented the whole category. When Buck put the 110 out in 1964, a strong lockback folder you could carry like a fixed blade was a new idea, and every big folding hunter since has been chasing it. Think about what that actually means. A knife made in America, with a lifetime guarantee and 60 years of pedigree, for under $50, when made in America almost always starts at $150. Look at nearly any United States folder from Benchmade or the Upper Spyderco line, and you're staring at 3 or 4 times the money. Buck doesn't pay a marketing tax because the 110 has been selling itself for 60 years, and the design paid off its tooling back when your dad was young. I'll give you the one catch for city carry straight. The classic 110 is a heavy belt knife, close to half a pound, and it opens two-handed off a nail nick. If that's too much knife for a pocket, Buck makes the 112 Ranger and the slimmer 110 versions that ride lighter and clip into jeans just fine. And there's a Slim Pro in a nicer steel if you want to spend a little more. But the standard 110 is the icon. It's built like a bank vault, and of everything on this list, it's the one I'd actually pass down. Not many $40 things earn that. Which brings us to number 1, the Civivi Elementum. If I could put one knife in one person's hand to prove this whole point, it's this one. The Elementum quietly became the default answer whenever anyone asks for the best cheap folder, and it earned that spot. Ball-bearing pivot so it drops shut like a knife, 3 times the price. A deep carry clip that hides it in the pocket. A hollow grind that cuts like a scalpel. And it rides right around $50 for the base model. It comes in 2 steels, and the choice is simple. The D2 holds an edge a hair longer, but can spot with rust like the rat if you ignore it. The Nitro V is a true stainless that's easier to live with. Pick by whether you'd rather sharpen a little less or worry a little less. People with real collections say the same thing about it. It makes you question ever spending hundreds again, unless you're just paying for a name. And here's the payoff I promised you at the top. Civivi isn't some random budget outfit. Civivi is the affordable house brand of WE Knife Company. WE builds titanium, super steel folders that sell for $200, $300, $400 and up, and they're some of the most drooled over knives in the hobby. Civivi comes out of the same city, the same factory in Yangjiang, and answers to the same quality control. One company runs 3 brands off the same benches, WE at the top, Civivi in the middle, a line called Sencut at the entry level. So when you buy an Elementum for $50, you're buying a knife built in the exact building that grinds a $400 blade. What the extra $350 buys is titanium, a fancier steel, and the name on the clip. What it buys and how well the knife is actually made is close to nothing. 2 things to know before you order. Stick to the base model, because the carbon fiber and Damascus versions climb over $50 fast, and a few people get one that needs the blade recentered out of the box, which is a 30-second turn of a screwdriver. That's the entire complaint list against the best value knife I know of. If even $50 is more than you want to spend, that same company's entry brand, Sencut, runs the same playbook a rung down for 30-something, out of the same building. But the Elementum is the one I put in a new carrier's hand when they ask where to start, and it's the one I'd bet against anything at 3 times the price. So where does all this stop? Spend past $150, and you reach knives like the American-made Kershaw Bel Air in a real super steel. And yes, it's better. It's a little better for 4 times the money, and that gap is the whole lesson. The climb from a $50 Elementum up to a $400 WE is almost all titanium, bragging rights steel, and a name on the blade. How well a knife actually cuts and locks and carries stops climbing way down at the bottom, right around these 8, which means the skill worth having was never spending more. It's reading a knife for what it is, the steel, the lock, the grind, and where it was really made, instead of the number on the tag. You already had the eye for value, or you wouldn't have watched this far. You just needed the names, and now you've got 8 of them. And if you're building a carry from nothing, go in this order. Start with the Elementum or the Rat, because one of those covers 90% of what a knife does all day. Add the Opinel when you want something that slices clean and disappears in a pocket. Only climb past $50 once you've actually worn one of these out and know exactly what you'd want more of, because most people never do. So here's my question for you. Somebody hands you $50 and says, buy the best knife you can walk out with. Which one are you grabbing?